All right, Matt, we wanted to jump in here and answer an email. There's an email that we received while we were away. This email came from PT in Utah, and basically he's asking us about Zelle. And this was a situation. My wife was going to Vegas for a birthday party with her friend. She owes money to the one that got it all set up. Her friend requested that she Venmo her the funds, and his immediate response was, well, hey, just use Zelle, because his wife wasn't using Venmo. And so, long story short, she used Zelle, transfer the funds, no fees, easy to do, and you don't have to download another app. Can you speak to how Zelle can affect the war on cash basket, this general idea of the war on cash basket? And it was a good question, because I think it's something worth noting. I think anybody who has a bank account with Wells or Bank of America or any of the big banks, you probably have access to Zelle. I know I'm a Bank of America account holder, and I have access to Zelle. Now, with that said, I've never used it. And I think, his question keys in on something that's worth noting. My initial response to that is that while Zelle is something out there, it's a nice value add for people who have those accounts. I think that when you look at companies like PayPal and Square and the services they offer, like Venmo and Zoom and whatnot, those are services that are being built more for the younger users in mind who are coming up into the banking world as they're growing up. So I look at my kids, for example, at 14 and 13 or 12 and a half years old. And, they're a little bit more of like that Venmo target versus something like Zelle is with a Bank of America account. Now, it's not to say that Zelle is not a threat. I mean, I think Zelle absolutely is going to continue to hold its own, but it is a very big market opportunity. And I don't think Zelle is something that necessarily threatens smaller companies like PayPal or Square. I do think it probably keeps them on their toes. What do you think about it, Matt?
Yeah, I think the one thing to keep in mind is just how many resources the people behind Zelle have. If you're not familiar, Zelle is kind of a project that was funded by a bunch of the big banks altogether.
Yep.
And the banks that funded Zelle have something like, $4 or $5 trillion in assets. A ton of resources at their disposal. So I think Square is an extremely innovative company. Same could be said for PayPal with Cash and Venmo. But not that it's a threat to Square or Venmo, but it's got to keep them on their toes. Just how much? I mean, you think Square is a big company? Square is tiny compared to these banks. Same with
Yeah.
PayPal. So it's just it's a question of resources in my mind, that when it comes to like how much you have to worry about a certain competitive threat. And Square and Venmo were the first movers, or Venmo especially was really the first mover there. But I think they still should, strive to innovate and one up the banks and kind of beat them at their own game, because the banks have a lot of resources they could throw at building competitive infrastructure if they really wanted to.
Yeah, you're right. I think banks do have a lot of resources there that they can do a lot of things with. I mean, it always kind of makes me go back to that idea that just because a company has the resources doesn't necessarily mean they can execute. So you have to be able to actually execute with the resources that you have. I think Zelle is something that's here to stay. And we were actually reading through an article here earlier in regard to PayPal and MasterCard executives who are actually talking about this space and really seeing it as such a great time for collaboration with all of these parties involved, big and small. I mean, they have opportunities to bring new products and relationships to market for banking customers of all ages. And so I think that, it's interesting when you see the executives from companies like PayPal and MasterCard saying that. I mean, those are two obviously very big and important companies that are doing a lot on their own out there. And when you talk about the opportunity to collaborate and do more, they're certainly not viewing this as a zero-sum game, right? They're not viewing this as win or lose. I mean, this is something where it's a big enough market opportunity that there are a lot of different ways these companies can all really succeed. And I think that's ultimately the way we look at it. I mean, we've talked before certainly about the war on cash, and I could have probably thrown 5 more companies in that basket if I wanted. I just, drew the line at 4. But anyway, I mean, it was a very good question from PT in Utah. We enjoyed having the chance to talk about it a little bit. And thanks, PT from Utah, for emailing us that question.